All right, let's get started for today. We've got a terrific first keynote to kick us off for our agenda today. James Stanier, CTO at Nord Health's Veterinary Division, is going to join us. He's going to make the case that AI is not just a coding tool. It's a thinking partner, a sounding board, and something that can actually help you lead better and not just ship faster, although that is very important as well. So James, welcome to the stage.
How's the volume? Okay? Quite a nice rug, actually. I need to work out where that's from. I need a rug at home. I'm going to sort of wander around the stage. I'm pretty sure that the diagrams that I have will be big enough. If they're not, don't worry. I'll just read them off the screen. And I'm also assuming this is the clicker. Right. So this is about AI for you. You know, the nice thing about this conference is that it's probably one of the few moments of the year you actually get to come away from your jobs and actually think about yourselves for a little bit. Don't need to think about your teams, you're not having loads of demands, you get to think about you. So this is about AI for you and for me, which is all the same thing. And what I'm going to walk through today is how in the last 6 to 9 months, basically in the time that I was knowing that I was going to give this talk, and it all kind of evolved up until last week, what I've been building for myself, which I think you can build for yourselves as well, which make your job a lot better and a lot easier. So I saw on the sticker, which is out there looking over the really nice London skyline, that one of the bylines for the conference is from isolation to elevation or something like that. Well, there you go. There's the link. This really is kind of the loneliest job. So I've been a CTO for about a year now. Previously, I was at Shopify for three quarters of a year. Senior engineering leadership is super lonely. There's a lot on your shoulders. The higher you go in the organization, the fewer people that you can really kind of parlay with and think out loud with. You've got your team, your direct reports look to you for answers. That's kind of stressful. Your peers are typically very, very busy with their own problems, especially when the peers like mine at the moment are like the VP of marketing, the VP of sales. I can't talk about technical architecture with them. And if you're reporting to the board, they don't really want to just have a chat every single day about your problems. They want execution. They want decisions, right? So it's a very, very lonely job. And hands up if you feel that you have a lonely job. Yeah, that's a lot of people. Cool, we're all kindred spirits. So this gets us into this performed certainty trap. You know, we have to be very confident. Like, I have to stand up here and be very confident in this talk, even if I don't feel like it. But we're always expected to have the answer. We're not expected to hold uncertainty externally, because it kind of feels like weakness. Our teams want us to feel like we've really got things under control. Our boards do. Which kind of means sometimes we don't take the right path to making decisions. We maybe decide things too quickly. We maybe don't research things enough because we feel that we're pressured to make decisions. And this is kind of a problem. And I mean, you're all super busy people. You know how much of your day you would really like to spend thinking about things thoroughly, but you just don't really ever get the chance, which inevitably means you get up really early, or after the kids have gone to bed, you spend a lot of time working overtime in order to actually spend the time that you need to get things done in your brain. So what if you had a thinking partner? Here's a hint to where this talk is going. And it's not someone who does your job. It's someone who helps you think. And what if this thinking partner that you had was always available? So they work all times of the day. They're never tired, not just physically, but also just not tired of your nonsense as well. And they're genuinely useful for the kind of slow and deliberate work that leadership really, really requires, but fundamentally, you don't get the time to do properly. And that's kind of where I came from when I started this job. And around about 3 or 4 months after I started this job, Claude Code was released, which was a really big step change in making this happen. Now, there are other tools available. You don't have to use Claude Code, but for the purposes of this talk, that's what we're going to be using as the example. Now, as CTOs, as mentioned by the 2 people who were standing here previously, we are being tasked with how do we generate more code? How do we go faster? How do we roll out AI to the organization? How do we create a chatbot in our application? How do we have text summarization? All this kind of thing. That's very important, agreed. But I think to an extent, for us as leaders to be better, it's kind of the wrong question. It's not about how do we code faster, going back to 2021, where it's how does everyone use Copilot? And then more recently, with the agentic IDEs, how do we get everyone to use Cursor? How do we get everyone to use Claude Code? It's not about doing that kind of thing and then having the productivity metric hat that you have to wear to show that graph goes up and to the right. I think that the right question for us as leaders is this, which is, how do I actually think better? That's really important, because if we just use AI as the code machine gun that's just being pointed at all of our code bases, then too much focus is on producing more code, and not necessarily enough focus is on why we're creating it in the first place. And the nice thing is that if we're able to think better, then better decisions compound with time. If you make better choices every single day, then over a year, over 2 years, over 5 years, with a long-term focus, your company, your department could be really, really amazing. And AI can help with both of these problems. It can help you fire hose code into your code base. It can help your engineers go faster. But only one of these things changes the outcome of your organization, and that's using AI to think better. So that's the sort of like the premise of this talk, is like, I want you to think about ways to use AI to think better, and I'll step through what I've been working on to do that, which is very easily reproducible. And just as some extra motivation here, when execution is getting cheaper and faster, I don't know what's going to be the deal in 5 years' time. Are all engineers just going to be generating everything? Are we going to be programming just in natural language? We kind of are already, to be honest, with the last sort of 6 months worth of models. The leverage now shifts to the decisions. So going back to what Andy was saying, is where does the human sit, and am I going to lose my job? I don't think so, because really the leverage is in what am I doing in that slow, deliberate, strategic thinking before the fast execution happens. So this is a really good thing. Does that make sense? I see some nodding. Excellent. So some of you have read this book. It's been around for a while. If you haven't read the book, most of you have probably read the 5-minute summary YouTube video that people don't buy books these days. Also, if you're really geeky, you probably know that some of the studies in this book aren't entirely reproducible, but anyway, it doesn't matter. The whole premise is that there's 2 modes that your brain is in, and it works in 2 ways. Different methodologies, different results, both are very important. System 1 and System 2. System 1 thinking is basically LLMs, right? It's fast, intuitive pattern matching. If one of you decides to take off your shoe and throw it at me, like George Bush had a long time ago now, I would just dodge out the way without thinking. I don't need to compute that, right? Similarly, if I've seen a problem before about how to build a particular API, I don't really need to think about it. It's just kind of we just do that again. It's like pattern matching. And that's what people expect us to do when they say, hey, what would we need to do in order to build this feature in 2 weeks with this and also on mobile? Can you tell me by the end of the day how to do it? That's what people want, is System 1 stuff out of us all the time. But really what we need to be spending our time on is this System 2, which is slow, deliberate, effortful thinking, which fundamentally nobody sees, but we have to find the time to do, but we never, ever get enough space in the day to do so. So in order to enable this System 2 thinking, and I'm going to stop walking into this plant, I swear, I've been using AI as a co-processor. And this co-processor model is fundamentally AI can be available at any hour on any topic, infinitely patient with all of my bad ideas, doesn't have an ego or agenda. It's not a colleague trying to get a promotion. It's not somebody trying to curry favor with me. Also fundamentally puts momentum behind my thinking, because obviously thinking requires energy, and often that activation energy to really start thinking about something seriously and make notes and designs is hard. It's a big lift. And AI as a co-processor can also surface perspectives that I wouldn't reach alone. I'll show you some examples of that in a minute. So since Claude Code came out, being able to build a system that allows me to do all of these things, and I'll show you all the examples in a minute, has honestly felt like I've been given superpowers in order to think about things, pull information, write information, synthesize information. And I mean, actually, it's really fun as well. I think my job is the most fun it's ever been since probably I was building stuff as an IC a long time ago. And the reason that this works, before we get into the examples, is this kind of externalized cognition model. Now, when you think about ideas, writing is always one of the best thinking tools. Now, if you think back to when you were in school and you had to do an essay, it's been a while since I had to do an essay, you know that you get given the essay brief. You don't then just sort of sit there for an hour going, what's the final essay going to be? What's it going to be? What's it going to be? And then bang, you one-shot it to the page. That never, ever happens. It's not like Athena bursting from the forehead of Zeus. It's that writing is the tool to do the thinking. You will start writing the essay. You've got a rough idea where you're going. But as you write, you kind of develop the idea. It gets better as you go, gets better, and then you edit it at the end. So In order to think about the world, you write text, and then you edit that at the end, and then the reader reads it and they get your view. The writing is the thinking process. And those of you who do journaling, or you keep a notebook, or any of that knows that like writing is that kind of energy, momentum to get thinking going. So that's why LLMs are great, because they're text, right? You write to them, they write back. It's a really nice, responsive partner that enables you to do this. So the thinking becomes visible, and it's examinable, and it's improvable, which is fantastic. So what this culminated in is building what I call a daily driver. This is just what I called it. But fundamentally, it's a workspace that learns about me, and it stores information about me and my teams and my job. And it shapes around my decisions, my blind spots, my role, and it builds up context over time about what I'm doing so that it can learn. And also, the more that I use it, it encodes my patterns, it gets to know how I think, how I work, and gets better. And fundamentally, what this is using Claude Code. So before I go any further, I just want to make sure I pitch this right. So who has used Claude Code? Pretty much the whole room. Great. Who uses it every day at work? A little bit less, but more. OK, great. So I think we're kind of all, I don't need to go super deep here. I can just sort of skim. But for those of you who haven't, Claude Code, you know the Claude models like Opus and Sonnet and so on. Claude Code lets you basically use it at your terminal. And then the sort of super win of that is that it has access to your files and your folders that it's running in. You can write, you can read from your directories. You can also do web searches. Everything it does is within your workspace. And then you can build up a repository effectively while you're using it that helps you get your job done. So don't worry about these being small. I'm just going to walk through the things in the screenshots. But my daily driver is effectively kind of 4 pillars. So one of them is systems that I have created for files and tools that hold the context that I want. And I'll go through those in a minute. It also consists of lots of different roles, which are ways in which I want Claude to talk to me in order to help me out. And I'll show you some of those roles soon. Basically saying, be this kind of persona for me. It also has integrations, and I'm super lucky that basically all of the tools that we use in my role have MCP servers. So I have access to absolutely everything that I want within my terminal. And I'll show you some examples of that soon. And this is all tied up in workflows, which are / commands in Claude Code, that are automated routines that kind of tie all of this together so that I can run my day, my week, my month from here. And this screenshot, for example, is a weekly ops report that I get where it goes off to Linear for each of the teams, finds out all the production bugs, internal bugs, break them down by team. Is there anything outside of SLA? All this stuff's defined in the folder. And it can just dump this out as a report. That would usually take kind of half an hour of clicking through dashboards. I can just background it now and then have it ready for the next kind of engineering leads meeting that I do. So here's kind of the main loop that I work with in my Claude Code directory. So obviously, I didn't know how familiar you'd be with this or not, but Claude.md is the main kind of system's brain definition, as it were. And I have a loop that looks like this. So within my folder, I have a markdown file called inbox, which is just the place that I tell Claude that if I just dump any old stuff in the terminal, copy and paste stuff from emails, Slack, wherever, thoughts, ideas, it goes in this inbox.md file. And it just stores things broken down by day of stuff that I need to triage later. I also have subfolders. I have a subfolder for brag docs. Does anyone know what brag docs are? Some people, a few. Brag doc is like a thing that Julia Evans came up with quite a long time ago now, where every single week you basically write a brag document of all the things that you've done that you're proud of. And then you have one for every week, and then when it's performance review time, you can say, well, hey, here's everything I've achieved in the last quarter. So I have a brag doc folder, and I have it automatically generate brag doc entries for anything it considers to be a win. I also have a decisions folder, so I have it set up so if I'm ever conversing with it and making a decision, it puts a decision entry in the decision folder with the date and what it was and so on. Again, just like keeping an archive and contributing to the context. Talking of context, I've got a context folder for reference material. This is where I have things like a markdown file with what are all the teams, who leads the team, what does the team own, feature database kind of thing. It's also got some other stuff in there. I'll show you an example of what some of that other stuff is in a minute. And then I have this Linear. We use Linear at work for ticket tracking, which has an MCP server, and that's the backing store for everything that I want to be off of my computer. So I have a private team in Linear for my sort of CTO to-do list, which you can sync everything with. And then I've got loads of other stuff, like I set my weekly goals, I have my OKRs, I've got reports that get generated, interviews in terms of questions and things. All of this is kept in my daily driver directory. And the depth that you go to is up to you. What you decide to store is completely up to you. But this is the core loop, and it kind of grows with your role. And I'll go through those slash commands in a minute. So talking about the roles. So before we talk about like reading, writing files or anything, how do I think better? Well, if I had my way, I work remotely, so I'm just sitting in my office in my own. If I had my way, I'd have like a squadron executive team around me, where I'd have like an executive assistant, I'd have my VP of product, I'd have like a copy editor, a distinguished engineer, I'd have a coach, I'd have a sparring partner, I'd have the founder. I'd have all of these people around me, and if you think of like watching The Thick of It or something like a government kind of or a West Wing style thing, I'd have all these people if I could, but I don't. So what you can do in your Claude.md file is you can define different roles in which Claude can operate in, which can help you think. And then what you can do is have explicit triggers, such as if I say, help me understand the technical side of this, it can trigger the distinguished engineer role. And what you can do, for example, is define the distinguished engineer role as, you are my distinguished engineer, you are my thinking partner, you own the technical architecture, here's our current architecture, and you can have it write out, what's your stack, and what do you do, and all that kind of thing. And I'll show you an example of that in a minute. And what's quite nice, the trick that I learned, is you can get Claude to always prefix whatever responses come back with the mode that you're talking to. So you can see Claude switching between EA, founder, strategist, distinguished engineer. So you're having conversations with all these different roles, and that works really, really well. So just as an example, to show you here, it says, someone who used to be a high performer has checked out for the last month or two. I need to have a conversation, but I'm not really sure what's going on. This is just a toy example. And it switches into coach mode. And coach says, OK, going curious, not with a conversation. Here's what to avoid in terms of questions. Be open. Maybe here's an opener for the one-to-one. Like, it's just incredibly useful having these roles to sort of guide the thinking partner that I'm working with at any given time. And I'll show you some more in a second. This is a sparring partner role. So like one of the things that I've noticed, certainly since I've sort of had CTO hat, is that sometimes some people feel uncomfortable pushing back because of your seniority. So I'm going to have an AI that pushes back on everything. So a sparring partner role is explicitly adversarial. Find problems in absolutely anything that I post in there. And try and define the role so it anticipates pushback from the CEO, the team, future self. So I don't actually want to do this, but as an example, I want to pause all new feature work for a quarter to focus purely on technical debt. What am I missing? Sparring partner. Pausing is a fiction. There's always support. There's always bugs. The CEO is going to ask you about something in 2 weeks. Tech debt is infinite. You're never going to get on top of it. Your problem is you can't prioritize. All right, thank you. So yeah, the sparring partner is super useful. And you can go through a lot of iterations of ideas with the sparring partner before it goes to anybody else, which makes you look more clever. This is a cool one, founder lens. So you can borrow wisdom that you don't have. So what you can do is, if you are someone who likes reading blog posts, podcasts, and so on, go onto YouTube, find podcasts of people that you admire, click on the little more button, click on the transcript, copy-paste the transcript into a file. Go and do that for all of the interviews that you find for the person that you like. Mega amount of text. Then get Claude to clean it all up and distill the leadership principles from that person into a big file. So I've tried this with James Dyson. I've tried it with my old boss's boss, Toby at Shopify. Works very well. And then you can kind of emulate people that you admire to basically, partner with and think through things with. And one very interesting thing with using Toby as an example, who I used to work with, often things come back to, are you showing enough courage in your decision? So I always find that I get picked out by Toby for like, if you had more courage, what would you actually do here? So you can distill the thoughts and the knowledge of anybody into a file, which are the principles, put it in your context directory, and then turn it into a role that's someone you can work with. Bonus points if you do it with someone that you really don't like. If you want to get the Elon kind of treatment, you could distill many, many hours of podcast conversations with Elon Musk into a role and then work with them. Very interesting. And then distinguished engineer. This is kind of more basic example, but you can configure a distinguished engineer with knowledge of your technical stack and what you do so that you've truly got a partner. If you're the engineering leader, you've got the equivalent IC leader. And for example, we're seeing more requests for real-time updates in the product. Should we invest in WebSockets, or is there something simpler that we can use? And you just get a really nicely pitched kind of idea. The surface is details that matter at scale, like latency, network boundaries, cost, scale, yada, yada, yada. I use the DE all the time. I basically just say distinguish engineer, comma, thing, and then you end up in a conversation with that role. So next, integrations. As I said, there's actually 7 now because I use Slack too. Claude Code is great because it has access to MCP. Most tools, modern tools now, have MCP servers available, so all of our stack has MCP access. So I can access Linear, Notion, which is our single source of truth, BetterStack for uptime, Grafana for all of our speed metrics, Octopus Deploy for all our deployments and DORA metrics, and also AWS Cost Explorer now has an MCP, which is great. So I can literally talk to AWS about our costs. I'll show you an example in a minute. And I can query these directly in the terminal. So I don't need to have loads of tabs open. I don't need to log into all these things. It's all just there. And what's really nice then, if you have roles, if you have access to data, then you can compose workflows. So this is kind of how I run my day. I have a slash command called /morning. So the first thing I do when I get on a computer, /morning. And I set this morning command so that it pulls everything from Linear that I have to do today. It also goes and checks overnight metrics such as uptime, incidents, and any kind of KPI deltas from Grafana. And it delivers me a morning briefing that's like, bang, here's what's happened since you logged off yesterday. And here's what you got to do today. I have a similar thing at the end of the day where I go /EOD. It captures any decisions by asking me prompts. It's like, what did you decide today? What do you think was a big win? What open threads are kind of kicking around in your mind before you log off? And then it dumps all of those into the inbox. And then when I do the morning, the next morning, it brings all those back, which is lovely. I have like a /triage command so that inbox, which you said there's an inbox markdown file that I just dump stuff in. The triage will go through, pick things out, see what needs to go into Linear as a long-term ticket, what could just be deleted, what needs to archive off into other places. And then there's other examples, but like weekly ops will generate an ops report, goes across all 9 teams, and I'll show you an example of that in a minute. So this is really, really cool. So the weekly ops report, for example, I run it once a week for my engineering leads meeting. It goes to Linear, it goes to BetterStack, it goes to Notion. It gives me a report that gives uptime by region, all of our SLAs on our bugs, incident summaries, including any postmortems that we need to finish. Takes like 2 minutes to generate all of this stuff, comes out as a markdown file, straight into the leads meeting, and we've got stuff to talk about. So this is like amazing, because like every single time I do this kind of thing, I'm saving 10, 20, 30 minutes, and it's just really, really good. So the composability insight really is that the system holds all of this context, so like I don't have to. Previous to this existing, I had all these tools, all this data in all these different places, and then I'm the integration because I have to go and log into Cost Explorer, I have to go into Linear, I have to go into Notion, I have to kind of build a spreadsheet, I have to do all this stuff. Claude is really great because with the MCP access, it allows me to sort of connect like my thoughts from yesterday to what my priorities are today, to this week's incidents, and it just keeps everything out of my head and everything gets stored in the system, just in Markdown, really, really simple. And my mental space is therefore freed up for the things that need human judgment, which I think is the thing I bring to the job. So composability in practice. We're a public company, so I have fuzzed the costs, but the kind of gist here is true. With MCP access to Amazon's AWS Cost Explorer and Grafana, you can say something like, what's the trending on hosting costs over the last month? Why did it spike in January? So why do I pay more money? And is there anything in Grafana that shows any kind of increase in traffic or load that explains why my costs went up? And with a few minutes of Claude going off and doing its thing, it acknowledges that there was like a 15, this is an example, 15% overall spend spike. Broken down, it shows that that came from RDS, which is Amazon's database, service, and Elasticache, with separate root causes. Went off to Grafana to show that over that time period that it measured the cost. The load on the system was on average higher after we brought on a particularly big set of customers. And we're running more on demand than we have reservations for at the moment. Therefore, I'm just going to go and make some reservations. I'm going to save a whole lot of money. Like, that's amazing. Like, this is like science fiction stuff that you couldn't do a few years ago. No browser tabs, no spreadsheets, no context switching. Literally, it goes off and fetches all of the data for me and comes back with something actionable that I can do. And this is what I mean when I say these are superpowers. Like, I don't have to delegate this stuff to a team. I can do it myself, which is amazing. So you might be seeing all this stuff. There's tons of things that I've showed you here. There's even more. I'm going to write some of this up on my blog next month. But there's a ton of stuff there, so you might be a bit overwhelmed thinking, like, where do I even begin with all of that? Well, I only started with one problem, and that's what I would advise if you want to do this for yourself, is I just wanted to automate my OKR reporting because it's really boring, where I have to go off and get all my uptime stats, my hosting costs. I have to go and get all this stuff for every kind of monthly board update packet, which is a pain. So I was like, can I use Claude Code to automate this? And the answer is yes. So really, it was just like, have a folder, Claude Code, define what my OKRs are, have all the MCPs, and then just like write a slash command that does it for me. And then it just grew from there, into having all the different roles, having all the reports, having the morning and the evening workflows, having the inbox. All of this just kind of organically grew as I learned how I worked and how I wanted to work. So you don't need to just do all this up front. Just do one thing and then see how it evolves. And then just trim it down to avoid accumulating crusts like you would in any kind of code base, so it doesn't start to collapse under its own weight. But what I have now is somewhere where literally a third of my monitor at any given time is that's open all the time, and it helps me do everything. Like just as an example, the other day, like we're coming in the comp review cycle, and I asked people to submit to me all of their promotions that they're suggesting. So I can just copy and paste the people and their justification, and it just went off and created in my financials folder, promotions, file per person, who proposed it, what are the reasons, formatted it all really nicely, and it just generated promotion packets for like every single person, which is amazing. And one of the things I'm going to try this week is it's budget time, and we're doing pay rises. So given I have a fixed budget and however many people, plus promotions, plus performance ratings, can it automatically solve what percentage increase does everybody get linked to performance, and also work out the ranges in which people are in. Like this is amazing stuff. So that would probably take me a week 5 years ago to do that. So one more thing that's, I think, really important here is that I am fundamentally still making the decisions. I'm just able to think better now. And going back to the slide talking about the Thinking Fast and Slow book, I can spend much more of my time in the System 2 mode, which is great. And I get to do more in my System 2 mode in far less time than I used to. So AI really is like a partner here. It's not a replacement for me. But I found that, like, certainly, as I'm sure many of you are feeling, that there's a pressure for leaders to be more hands-on, to be more in the details, whether that's like doing this kind of stuff or whether it's like shipping code. AI's come along at the right time in a way, because it allows us to get deep in the details and to be super productive and impactful, but actually in a way that I feel also makes me better, because I've still got my judgment and my taste, my humanity, which I hope is reasonable, but I'm no longer thinking alone. I honestly feel now that even in the evening, if I'm sweating over something a little bit, I've got a system that will really help me chew through my thoughts, put me at ease, make me feel better, give me something I can then come back tomorrow with that eases my anxiety slightly. So there we go, thank you. I've completely failed at any kind of self-promotion, so I've failed to put any of my books there. I've also failed to put my newsletter, but you can always Google my name and you'll probably find me. If you want, we've got a few minutes for questions, so if you want to chuck a question here, it means you don't have to get on the mic. You can just type something and it will magically appear somewhere, and we can go from there. But thank you very much. Excellent question. This is cool, isn't it? So when AI plays devil's advocate, how do you know it's surfacing real risks versus just pattern matching and what contrarian thing? That's a really good question. I actually don't think there's a clear answer to that question, other than remembering this is only something to help you, and always question what it says and research what it says and don't trust it blindly. I think it's the only thing I can say to that one. How much time do I spend in average in Claude Code per day? Oh, geez. Let me think. 7.5 hour workday. I mean, it's always open on my screen. So like I'm using it all day, honestly. Have I open sourced my setup? Would I consider it? I could actually. It wouldn't be very hard. The only problem is my current repository is full of a whole load of like PII and stuff that's like the details of the company. So if I did take some time, I could probably strip out the bits that are non-pertinent information and put it on my GitHub. So noted, thank you. What happens when Claude is down? Are you incapacitated? Not so much. I mean, you just fall back to the old mode. So if I need to go and look at AWS Cost Explorer, I'll do it in the browser, or if I need to think about something, I'll use a pen and paper or whatever. So no, and Claude's uptime isn't super great at the moment. You don't worry as a public company to feed insider proprietary info into Claude. We have an enterprise contract with them. They offer us a bunch of guarantees with that. What approach do you take to avoid AI bias in your thoughts? Similar to the other question, which is like, don't trust it blindly. Always make sure that you make the decision. How long until my team becomes redundant with AI getting better by the day? I don't think my team's going to become redundant. We're not a very big team anyway, which is kind of why I quite like my job. But what I do think we can do is basically just stay headcount flat now going forward. Like, we can get smarter with problems, and we can try and stay a fixed size and make sure that we've got really, really good people and just get more productive. That's my view anyway. How to detect and deal with hallucinations? Again, don't trust it blindly, but honestly, since Opus 4.5 came out, like, models are really good now, seriously. Do you find yourself not actually thinking? Good question. I wrote something on my blog a couple of months back about use it or lose it, which is like, if you outsource too much stuff to AI, do I then diminish my critical thinking capabilities and I erode my critical thinking over time? I explored that kind of in depth on that blog post, and it kind of shows my approach to that. So I'll maybe say go read that. What do my leadership peers think about this? My CEO is now coding. He comes to reviews with prototypes he's built himself, which is honestly, it's great. It's honestly great. Did you use Claude to build the skills personas workflows too? I'm out of time, but yes. So basically all that stuff, you can just say, hey, Claude, I want to do this thing. Help me build it, and then go back and forward. And is it possible not using Claude? Quite possible. It's just a folder with markdown stuff in it, and then you could use whatever you want. You could use Cursor, you could use Codex, you could use Gemini CLI. I just happen to use Claude. I'm not sure what the equivalent of like slash commands is in other things. Did Claude write this talk? Haha, no. But it did generate the slides. And how do I manage the context and prevent slop? Again, just trying to use my intuition. Do I use Claude directly in the terminal? Yes, I term 2, and we're gone. Haha, thank you.